good thing about that is that they get rewarded for good critical thinking. And they see in their peers the respect that comes from those who can see that person is actually thinking well. You know, this person is using reason, putting together coherent arguments in good English, you know, using all of the good skills. All right? And they start to get feeling good about that. All right? Well, once we do that for several weeks, I then move on to thinking about things like theism. Let's look at our ideas about God. And of course, you know, you see some of them go, uh-oh. Right? Okay. But you can start off very, very well with that. And what I do is, who believes in Zeus? Okay. You know, and so we look at the pantheon of gods and we say, well, we don't believe it. Okay, who believes in God? And several will put their hands up. Right? And I say, well, let's examine that. Right? Let's examine it in exactly the way we've been examining every other aspect of what I call woo, you know, but I put it in different words. Right? And happily, even though many of the theists, or most of the theists, will not give up their theism just because they've come to one of Laurie's classes, unfortunately, they at least can accommodate, by the end of a year's work with me, they can accommodate that it's okay to doubt. It's okay to be sceptical, and it's okay to inquire. Right? And it's okay to expand your use of language and your use of reasoning and critical thinking skills to make a difference to how you work out the world. And I find that gratifying. The most gratifying thing I've ever had is somebody who came to me at the end of a year who had been a New Earth creationist, you know, fundamentalist, and who, at the end of the year, told me that she'd renounced the entire belief system. And I thought, job well done. Well, and she did that. She did that because she really actively applied these newfound skills to her own. I think now, you know, that's a 1 in a million, of course. But at the very least, being able to develop, especially young people, you know, people of 17 or 18 who already know everything, being able to develop their critical thinking skills to the point where they can at least accommodate criticism and discourse that is not simply self-perpetuating is a wonderful thing. And so, I mean, for our purposes, we generally come across adults who are steeped in certain modes of thinking, and so the arguing with the Sandys of the world and the like is probably going to be pointless in the end. Do you think, Steve? Do you think we would ever change somebody like Sandy?
At what age can language play skills be successfully taught? Is it too late for people like Sandy? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it might be. Certainly it's too late for somebody like a Bernstein, I would think.
Totally bizarre person.
Yeah, entirely bizarre, and steeped in a certain modality of thought that doesn't allow him to. Well, see, Bernstein's a really interesting character because Bernstein is entirely oppositional in his thinking. You know, not accommodationist at all. Will not accommodate different ideas. And I think Bernstein has got stuck there somewhere.
Something that did come to mind when you were talking about that thing about people being trapped in a jail of restricted language.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe it's not just that they're locked in, we're kind of locked out. The language that we use doesn't fit in their box.
Well, and also...
Or is it possible that we can have language that gets into that?
Well, and also, that's true. And also, our language is threatening as well. You know, this is part of another Bernstein, you know, who was a real scientist, looked at in-group, out-group behaviours, a psychologist. If we call psychologists real scientists. My two best friends are both psychologists, and I get into that one all the time. But Bernstein looked at how language is used in group out-group dynamics, and found that the language of the in-group is this perpetually self-reinforcing measure, right? That has this affective component, this emotional component. Yeah. You know all about it. And so the language of the out-group, right, has to be opposed. Right? There's a fortress mentality where, see, and Bernstein and Santi and others have this fortress mentality where they will run out of the fortress gates for a skirmish, right, but then run back in. And so your first question there, you know, are language games important? I'd have to defer to my wife here on this because she's the expert on that, and she would say absolutely that language development in the early childhood phase and primary up to what age, Chris?
Well, it's most important up to the age of 6.
Yes.
And the research that we were talking about earlier is done in the States on children from people from a professional background, people from kids from parents from a sort of middle class background, and then people on welfare. And the whole idea was to try and break down the barriers of the social system and find out why there's such a big gap in the social system. And they decided to look at language, and that's what they found, this incredible gap. And it was really upsetting because they thought, well, how are we going to change this? Because it all happens before the age of 3. So the only thing is early intervention, and a lot of kids in childcare centres now, so you know, it's putting extra language programs into childcare centres. So that was one of the ways we can start changing things. And also trying to expand kids' language in K to 6 at school, but you've got to do that threefold because they're not getting that at home. And when you do it at school, it's not just developing their language, their vocabulary, it's their receptive language, so they're understanding what they're receiving. When they receive ideas where they have to think critically, that they can understand the concept. So it's really so closely linked to their cognitive development. Language development, cognitive development go hand in hand. And, you know, the psychologists who assess kids assess verbal IQ and performance IQ. And if their verbal IQ is low, it means they've got a language disability. And it will bring down your level of thinking and your assessed level of intelligence. So it's all about really stimulation, thinking, not necessarily putting pen on paper, and that's the way we're looking at it. Education now and learning is not pushing kids into writing too early, but trying and enrich and develop that language, so then they've got at least something to write about later.
And they've got the cognitive skills that are associated with language that allow them to work on and process difficult concepts. All right, I've taken up quite enough time.